So here's this thing. I'm going to do a couple quick samples of some adjusting, including this first one, which is going to be nothing more than just a no-nonsense darkening up one of my shapes a little bit. I'm looking right here and thinking, might be nice if that one was a little bit darker. So this is just indigo. This is a synthetic white Taklon brush by Robert Simmons. And it's a number 2. And I'm finding that, especially for small stuff, it's nice to have. Yeah, I am liking this one more than ones that are too soft and pointy. So there's adjusting I could do sort of all over the place. This is part of the point of this, is to try to change things subtly, making that one a little bit darker. The other thing, one other thing I want to demonstrate is how to get a graded effect of something becoming darker as it gets closer to an edge. So I'm going to look around and I'm going to think about what would be kind of fun to try to darken up. And I'm definitely, as far as an edge go, just along an edge, more so than just the whole flat shape, the whole shape. So I want to look and see where there's one next to each other, a darker and a lighter. And I'm going to come into the darker of the two and make a what I'm calling a little stripe over on the, I want it to get darker over here, but then I want it to grade out to just clear water. So what I'm going to do first is make a stripe, and then I'm going to get the paint out of my brush. I'm going to bring some water back in. So it looks like this. The tricky part is to try to make it so the paint won't come all the way over, because anywhere there is water, the paint will want to go. I'm grabbing a, oh my, that's fun. I'm grabbing a little bit, actually quite a bit more concentrated color. Paint of that same color. This is all indigo. I don't know if I mentioned that before, by Daniel Smith. But I usually end up kind of doing both of those things. So I usually end up kind of making a stripe, and then let's see if I can try a better example of that. Part of it is making sure, well, there's several things going on, but if the stripe I put down is too watery, then it's going to want to go kind of quickly that stripe is pretty dark. That might be a little bit darker than I was thinking. We'll see. But I'm getting the paint out of my brush. I do, especially if you're using a soft touch, I kind of like to try to just approach it gradually, and then eventually there's that fun moment where the water is gonna bridge the dry paper. So yeah, that was a good example of getting quite a bit darker. Let's see, what else could I do? Yeah, let me just look for another place to do that. Let's see. How about this one right here? Make sure I'm not sticking my hand in it. I'm not so concerned with making sure that's all perfect. If you get too much water, then it's going to sort of shoot over. Not enough water and it won't want to blend. So I get to that point right there. Depending on a couple things, I might just sort of keep painting till that edge. Sometimes the paint will shoot over really quickly and I don't need to. Sometimes I need to coax it over a little bit more. I could try to come back and make that a little bit darker and thicker, but I think what I'm just going to do is another example. Getting most of the water out of it, but enough to just sort of try to come back and blend that edge. Remember to keep remembering what's in your brush at any given moment. Let's try sort of a, what should we try? What if it was on a shape that it was the lighter one that I was trying to make so that edge is sort of graded. And when I say lighter, I'm talking about this one is lighter than the one that I'm putting it next to. That wasn't so impressive, was it? But now that my shape is sort of wet, I am going to come back in with a little bit of a stronger, more concentrated pigment. And drop in a little there. I want to clean this up just a touch, but I wanted to make sure I got the paint out of my brush before I did that. And while it's wet, if I can drop in, it's important to have a nice, the synthetic brush is helpful for this because it just holds less water. And part of what's tricky about this is getting stronger pigment but not too much more water. So I could, if I keep coming at that with even a little bit more concentrated color, no, that's not going to blend as much. So right now I have the never-ending watercolor dilemma. should I let it dry or should I stay or should I'm gonna come back in with just a little bit more, back in with a little bit of water, because I wanted to, the blend was being a little bit too stark, too defined. So as you'll see, another way of getting things to shift back over one direction is by bringing in water. This has when I do it on this lighter shape next to the darker one, it doesn't have the same impact of doing it to a lighter one against the darker one, because, I'm sorry, a dark, like I've been doing before, making the darker one just a touch darker to increase the contrast that much more. It's a subtle thing, but it's nice. And the last thing, so that was just little sort of flat shapes, a little bit of graded washes with doing the stripe first. And also I will demonstrate how you can also do that with just wetting the shape first. So this is clear water. And getting some color in your brush, this is one of the times when it's good to know, to be able to see how wet the paper is. I do notice myself and other artists sort of, especially with watercolor, doing that sort of flicking thing. Definitely there's some times when I'm sort of just dabbing a little bit of color in. Good example of messing up an edge and then trying to adjust it. So that flicking sort of thing. So you can have fun with that and do all kinds of play with these shapes. Looks like I'm doing another one here. Not enough water. So like I think I said, oftentimes I feel like I'm sort of doing both. Kind of starting off with that a stripe and then bringing in some water. But then oftentimes it's not as perfect as I want, and I'll come back and drop a little bit of color. I wanted to do one last thing for this particular tutorial of especially one thing I also like to do. There's an example right here. When I have a really dark one next to a light one, and I can I am going to paint just clear water. I'm going to drop some water on the shape where I didn't mean to. This is kind of a small brush for this, but that's okay for right now. But I'm just going to paint this paint, quote unquote, with clear water this shape first. And then instead of dropping in extra color by getting some more paint from my palette, I'm going to make sure that that's cleanly covered with water. And then I'm going to come over to this one and I'm going to say, hey, you got too much paint over there. No, I'm sort of joking, but I'm going to do it and then I'll talk about it. So that's a fun little way to, especially when I have a dark, like here, a dark shape juxtaposed against a lighter one, and I want to get a little blended edge, especially on the lighter one. This kind of, I use this kind of thing for rounded